Well, thousands of Jewish worshippers gathered at Jerusalem's Wailing Wall for the traditional priestly blessing prayer. The Birkat Kohanim, or Cohen's blessing, is a ritual dating back to the time over 2,500 years ago when King Solomon's temple stood on the same site. The blessing is performed by male Jews who can trace their lineage back to the priestly castle. 3 times a year, they arrived at the Western Wall to bless the Jewish people. Men cover themselves with prayer shawls and read the Torah as part of the worship. The paved prayer area in front of the wall is the last remnant of the second Jewish temple destroyed in the 1st century. And still from Jerusalem, where Israeli police have entered the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, a sensitive Jerusalem holy site, 2 days after attack on Palestinians. The police cleared Palestinians out of the sprawling esplanade outside the mosque itself, while dozens of Palestinians remained inside the building chanting, "God is greatest." The police said they entered to facilitate the routine visit of Jews to the holy site. They said Palestinians had stockpiled stones and set up barriers in anticipation of another attack, and footage provided by the police showed fireworks being thrown inside. And the police said they were committed to facilitating freedom of worship for Jews and Muslims. But shortly afterwards, Palestinians reported brief clashes with Israeli police just outside the mosque compound. Palestinian medics said 10 people were wounded. The site is the 3rd holiest in Islam and the holiest for Jews, who refer to it as the Temple Mount. Meanwhile, the Israeli army conducted raids in the occupied West Bank in a wave of Israeli violence during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. The IDF shared footage of its forces arriving in Husan at night and entering a home. In a statement, they said this past Tuesday, an Israeli civilian was trapped in a violent riot, which was instigated by Palestinians in the town of Husan. The civilian was violently attacked by the rioters, who hurled rocks and burnt his vehicle. Overnight, security forces apprehended 4 suspects who were involved in the attack. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Health Ministry said on Monday that 2 Palestinian men were critically injured by Israeli forces in the village of Yamun, west of Jenin, in the northern West Bank, when dozens of Palestinians started throwing rocks and explosives at the troops, who returned fire. On to other news, where Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi warned that Israel will be targeted by his country's armed forces if it makes the tiniest move against Iran. He spoke as talks stalled in Vienna over a deal to rein in Iran's nuclear capabilities, which Tehran says are used for peaceful purposes. Israel opposes a deal, saying it does not do enough to curb Iran's nuclear program or its military activities across the region. Israeli officials have said they will unilaterally do what is necessary to protect their country. Raisi addressed Israel directly during a speech at an annual parade of Iran's armed forces. Raisi did not elaborate, but said Iran watches any move by Israel closely. Iran has not recognized Israel since the 1979 Islamic Revolution that ousted the pro-West monarchy and brought Islamists to power. It supports anti-Israeli militant groups such as Hamas and Hezbollah. Raisi said that Iran's military power is a deterrent. He said the army managed to improve its capabilities despite years of sanctions on the country over Tehran's nuclear program. Now, Monday's parade showcased jet fighters, helicopters, drones, and air defense systems, as well as military tanks, missiles, and naval vessels.
مخفی نیست و بدانید اگر کوچکترین حرکتی